Hello, children. Now we begin the second module of this lesson, the Great Stone Phase 1. In the first module, we saw how a young boy named Ernest sat with his mother near his cottage, and the mother told him about a legend, a prophecy, in which she said that the rock mountains which they saw, that mountain resembled the face of a human being, isn't it? She said that it was prophesied that one day a man with such a face would come to their valley. Ernest was very happy to hear this, and he told perhaps he will live to see that man. His mother was a loving and thoughtful lady. She didn't want to discourage this boy, so she encouraged him, saying that perhaps he may live to see this man. Now, the next paragraph, page 126, second paragraph, children. And Ernest never forgot the story that his mother told him. It was always in his mind whenever he looked upon the great stone face. He spent his childhood in the log cottage where he was born, was dutiful to his mother, and helpful to her in many things, assisting her much with his little hands and more with his loving heart. In this manner, from a happy yet often pensive child, he grew up to be a mild and quiet youth. The word pensive means a thoughtful person. Assisting means to help. So now, since that day, Ernest always remembered the story which his mother had told him. And he would always think about it whenever he looked at the great stone face. It was a huge rocky mountain, isn't it, children? It was visible from a far off distance. Now, when Ernest was a young boy, during his childhood, he lived with his mother in a log cottage where he was born. He was a responsible boy and was very loyal to his mother. He was a helpful boy also. He would help her in doing a lot of things. Though his hands were small, but he had a big heart, children, a loving heart, a caring heart. He was very obedient and also a bit thoughtful as a child. And as he grew up, he became a quiet person. In his youthful days, he grew up into a calm and quiet person. Now, the next paragraph. Ernest had no teacher, but the great stone face became one to him. When the work of the day was over, he would gaze at it for hours until he began to imagine that those vast features recognized him and gave him a smile of kindness and encouragement. So on and off Ernest could see this great stone face. He just had to lift his head up and he could see that huge stony figure smiling at him. He never went to school and he never had a teacher. But this great stone face acted as a teacher in his life. When the work of the day was over, which means after the day's work, or each day, after doing all his work, he would just stare at the great stone face for hours together. The word gaze means to stare. So he would just look at that great stone face for hours together. And slowly, slowly, he began to think that those vast features, the word vast means huge, very big, or immense features, recognized this boy and smiled at him. He felt that the great stone face was encouraging him. So he sort of, established an emotional bond with that great stone face. Though it was made up of rocks, it had no life, but still he could feel some emotional attachment with that great stone face. When he looked at that, he felt as if that huge stone face was smiling at him, was looking at him kindly and encouraging him. Now, the next paragraph. About this time, there went a rumor throughout the valley that the great man, who was to bear a resemblance to the great stone face, had appeared at last. It seems that many years before, a young man had left the valley and settled at a distant seaport. Gathergold, which was his name, had set up as a shopkeeper, and being sharp in business matters, had become so very rich that it would have taken him 100 years only to count his wealth. In time, he thought of his native valley and decided to go back there and end his days where he had been born. The word rumor means to talk about something or someone which is not correct. A false news, you can say. The word resemblance means to look alike. The word native means a place where a person is born. Now, as Ernest was living his life, his calm and quiet, comfortable life, suddenly there was a talk in that valley that a great man, and those people believed that this man's face resembled the great stone face. And who was that man, children? His name was Gathergold. This Mr. Gathergold, though he was born in this valley, he had set up his shop or his business in some very far away, distant land. This man was very good with his business. He had very good business skills. He had settled in a distant seaport and he became a very established businessman. As he was a skillful man, he became very rich. He became so rich that it would have taken him 100 years to count his wealth. Imagine how rich this Mr. Gathergold was. When he slowly started growing old, when he had earned enough wealth, Mr. Gathergold thought of going back to his valley, the place where he was born, as he wanted to spend his last days there. So people came to know about this and they started talking about him. They said that Mr. Gathergold's face resembled this great stone face. Now, the next paragraph. Ernest had been deeply stirred by the idea that the great man, the noble man, the man of prophecy, after so many years of delay, or after so many ages of delay, was at length to be seen in his native valley. While the boy was still gazing up the valley one day and imagining that the great stone face returned his gaze, the noise of wheels was heard, and a crowd of people cried, "Here comes the great Mr. Gathergold." So, like everybody, Ernest was also waiting to meet that man whose face would resemble this great stone face, isn't it? He also heard about Mr. Gathergold. The word stirred means he was moved by the idea. When he heard that Mr. Gathergold was coming, he was very much moved with this idea. He also wanted to meet him because people said that Mr. Gathergold was that noble man, the man about whom people had prophesied, that man whose face resembled this great stone face. So at last he was going to come, isn't it? People were going to meet this man. So the whole village or the people living in that valley were very excited. Even Ernest was very happy, children, but he used to still sit and gaze at that stone face. And one day when he was doing that, he felt as if the great stone face was returning his gaze. Gazing means to look at something for a long time, to stare at something. And when he was doing that, he heard the noise of the wheels, and the crowd of the people were shouting, "Here comes the great Mr. Gathergold, the rich man whose face resembled the great stone face." Now, the next paragraph. A carriage drawn by 4 horses dashed around the turn of the road. Within it, thrust partly out of the window, appeared the face of an old man with yellow skin. "The very image of the great stone face," shouted the people. "Sure enough, the old prophecy is true. Here we have the great man at last." So he heard the noise of the carriage, and what did he see? He saw a carriage drawn by 4 horses dashing down the turn of the road. Dashing means coming in full speed. And who was inside that, children? Mr. Gathergold. Within it, he could see inside the carriage an old man was sitting whose skin was a bit yellowish. He was old, isn't it? People started screaming. They only saw a small glimpse of this man, and they started shouting, "This Mr. Gathergold looks exactly like the great stone face." And the others supported them. They said, "Sure enough, the old prophecy of this valley is going to come true. At last we could see this man, the man whose face resembled the face of the great stone face." Now, the next paragraph. And what greatly puzzled Ernest, they seemed actually to believe that here was a likeness which they spoke of. He turned away sadly from the wrinkled shrewdness of that unpleasant face and gazed upon the valley where the stone face seemed to say, "He will come. Fear not, Ernest, the man will come." The word shrewdness means very cunning. Unpleasant face means not a kind face, a bit rude, unkind face. Now all the people were saying that this Mr. Gathergold looked like the great stone face, but Ernest was not sure. He was not ready to believe that, so he slowly turned off. He was sad because he also expected to meet that man with the stone face, isn't it? But when he turned away sadly, he just looked at that great stone face again. And you know what did he see? He felt as if the stone face was telling him, "Don't be sad, Ernest. The man whose face will resemble my face will come. The man will surely come." Because the face of this great stone face was very kind. But this Mr. Gathergold, he looked very cunning, unkind, a very rude face this man had, and Ernest could not accept him. But when he looked at that stone face, he felt as if the stone face was telling him, "Wait, Ernest, that man with my face, or whose face will resemble mine, will come surely. You have to wait." So Ernest was happy now. He was very sure Mr. Gathergold did not resemble this great stone face. Now I come to the end of the second module, children. Thank you.